Here we go. All right, coming to you from this sunny day, I am thrilled to be speaking today with Carol Leaman, co-founder and CEO of Axonify, based in Waterloo, Canada. For those who don't know, Axonify helps frontline employees with the support and the tools they need to do their best work. Axonify has over 160 customers in over 150 countries, including Walmart, Bloomingdale's, Levi's, and Merck, just to name a few. Carol is an experienced serial entrepreneur and CEO who's built and exited 3 companies and is now building her 4th in Axonify. I've known Carol for a number of years, and I thought she'd be an excellent person to speak to, to share her wisdom with startup and scale-up founders and CEOs for at least 3 reasons. Number one, she has an incredible track record of growth and success, not only at Axonify, but at her previous companies. Number two, she's got an incredible understanding of the entrepreneurial experience as a former CEO in residence at Tech in Waterloo, where she mentored and coached early stage companies. So she's not only sort of like been in the seat, but she's also understands and can empathize, with individuals who are in that type of position. And number three, she has one of, if not the most high EQ approaches to leading a company, which I've seen not only from our conversations, but also if you read any of her public posts on Axonify's blog or in social media, such as LinkedIn, I can honestly say that both in conversation and what comes across and what she writes, Carol is one of the most genuine and authentic leaders I've ever had the privilege of meeting and interacting with. So Carol's high EQ leadership, and she's blushing, shows up in a number of different ways. Like number one, with customers, 97% customer satisfaction and a 92% gross dollar retention rate. And let's bear in mind that she is working and the company is serving retail, which has obviously been enormously hard hit. So to have those kind of levels of satisfaction and retention through all of what we've been through is simply phenomenal. Number two, product, 5-star rating on G2 for Axonify, 4.6 star rating on Capterra. So it clearly comes through in the product as well. And finally, culture, 4.6 stars on Glassdoor, 98% CEO approval rating, 89% employee satisfaction, and Axonify was recently named as a best workplace for women. Final note, and we'll get to this later, but just a couple of weeks ago, Axonify actually acquired a company called M-Level, and we'll look forward to talking about that later and how that impacts culture and bring the company together. So Carol, thank you very much for taking this time for us to catch up and for your sharing your experience and learnings with other startup and scale-up founders and CEOs.
Thank you, Alex. That was so kind of you to say all of that. And I'm just thrilled to be here and chatting with you and hopefully lots of other folks will be listening.
Yeah, thank you. And I know a ton of people are going to get value out of this. So let's go back to the beginning, because again, we've known each other for a few years now. What's Axonify's origin story and how you and your co-founder Christine saw the opportunity and went about starting, saying, hey, this is something we want to address, and and then how did you go about starting it?
Mm-hmm. That is a great question, and it's a bit of a story. So as you mentioned, early stage technology has been my life for the last 20 plus years. And I was, in fact, running my last business when I had a lawyer, corporate lawyer, who introduced me to the original founders of Axonify because they needed help. And I did mentor, again, as you mentioned, and continue to mentor lots of early stage entrepreneurs. So I agreed to meet with his other client. And to my great surprise, it was a husband and wife who were in their late 60s, had a boutique marketing business, and they had a client that had some issues that they needed to address with respect to training. So I started to help them, really got quite fond of them, thought they had the grains of a really good idea, although the way they'd executed it was in fact quite poor. And then lo and behold, while I was helping them, Google came and bought my last company out of the blue. So I had a decision to either go to work at Google or to buy this from the original founders. And I had a friend in the community who was also in a business that was being sold. And I said to her, hey, do you want to come in and buy this with me? And we can rebuild it from scratch, take that one customer and start over. And she said, let's do it. So that's what we did. We bought the business, took the one customer, re-architected the code from scratch, and started over completely.
That is fascinating. Carol, that's so funny that, we've chatted a fair number of times and I didn't know that you'd actually acquired this business, but what a great story. And like entrepreneurship is really about sort of like taking and building and so on. So it doesn't matter whether you start from scratch or take something else and reboot it, like awesome. I love it.
I often say I don't have an original idea in my head, but I can certainly identify a great idea when I see one. And that's the way I look at this, that John and Rebecca had come up with a good idea. They just didn't know how to build it into a company. And that was where I came in because I did know how to build it into a company and I was able to identify the good idea.
Yeah, and you've also spoken at length, a number of times we've shared and you shared about how instrumental your co-founder, has been in the growth of the company. So you obviously, it's not only identifying the right opportunity, but Jim Collins, put the right people on the bus. You obviously identified the right person to have on the bus to help really grow the company.
Christine, really and truly has been my equal partner through this journey. And she and I have very different skill sets. I couldn't possibly do what she does. And likewise, she trusts me to do all of the things that I do for the business. I truly couldn't have chosen a better business partner for this. And, one of the first things that we did was I had a vice president of marketing and a vice president of software development that I'd worked with previously that I immediately went and got as well. And so we formed the nucleus of that original team that were, seasoned, had been through startup a number of times and could really hit the ground running in meaningful ways that could accelerate that first year's activity. And then lay the foundation for what we could kind of build on from there. So Christine was essential, and then Phil and Laura were also essential to this.
I can see how you completely de-risk this business from the very beginning because you've obviously got a ton of experience. You find Christine, who's amazing on the sales side, and I'm assuming you're covering sort of like strategy and like good understanding of product. You have these other individuals where, I mean, you already have they're known quantities. You already know kind of what they can deliver. You've had the opportunity to like work with them before. You're not just plucking people out of the blue. So sounds like you had a very solid foundation from very early on.
Exactly. That is key for me. And, I do go after people I know and trust, and it allows me to release anything in terms of I don't have to micromanage anything. I just know they're going to execute in their role and do it in a really mature, ego-less way that aligns with my own kind of values and way of working. And that one thing alone has allowed us to accelerate and be successful over 10 years. We model that. Everybody we hire models that. And it just gets past so much noise that you then can focus on the things that matter in terms of building the business.
So I love that you touched upon that, in terms of like egoless and, and consistency in terms of values, because one of the things that, we aim for in these conversations is really understanding the symbiotic nature between growth and culture. And, it sounds like you had a very, rather than like taking a company from scratch and then building the culture, you almost had like a culture built in, just the four of you sort of working, and you already sort of knew one another and worked together and so on. So let's just talk about culture. Like, how do you define culture, and how critical was it for you as you have this opportunity, you think, hey, here's a business opportunity, but I need to make sure in order to address this that I've got the right kind of culture from the very beginning?
That's such a good question. And I will say this, early in my career, I worked for an individual that epitomized every wrong thing you should possibly do to make somebody want to come to work every day.
We probably all had, at least one of those in our careers.
Exactly, exactly. And it really was such a formative part of my 20s, in fact, that I learned so specifically what not to do and how not to make people feel every single day, because I observed around me what that did from an individual productivity, engagement, willingness to give it their all sort of perspective. And so when I left that leader, I just immediately came to do the opposite of everything. And so starting from the very first business I ran in my early 30s, I just had this very almost unconscious way of how people feel when they come to work every day is is a demonstration of what the culture is. And so really for me, culture is the feeling people have around what it's like to work at a company. And if that feeling is supportive, is good, is comfortable, is allows you to be vulnerable, there's a feeling associated with all of that that is nothing but good. And so it's a culture is a whole collection of things that allow people to be who they are, good, bad, ugly, in the best way, and support them in how they execute against their roles to make them feel like they're adding value, they're making progress, they're being, recognized for it. And that when they think about where they work, they have a positive feeling about it. I actually onboard all new employees. And when I do, I say to them, at whatever point you leave Axonify, I want you to look back on your career and think, this was the very best place I ever worked.
Oh, it's so, sorry, I apologize.
No, and that's, to me, that is the epitome of culture, is that feeling you have about working someplace. And I just want it to be good.
So two things. One, sorry, and the reason I interrupted was I have used those very same words about the companies where I've worked and said exactly the same thing. I don't know
Awesome.
if I was always successful, unfortunately, and there were, and it all comes back to like how successful you are at creating culture and so on. But 100% the same thing, which is how do you make it the best experience that someone can, that when they look back on their careers, that it stands out as like the highlight of their working life. And I think if leaders can aspire to that generally, they'll bring about a good culture. The other thing which I loved, and I really kind of want to just bring that out again, and I literally, I don't think I've ever heard this from anyone else, is how you are saying the culture is the sort of like company manifestation of the aggregate of sort of how the individuals feel. So if we can bring about the positive feelings in individuals, the culture is going to be the aggregate of that. And then of course, there could be the negative side of that as well, right? I mean, as per your experience, you can have negative feelings, then you can have a negative culture. But if you can bring about that sort of positive feeling in individuals and treat them on a sort of one-by-one basis, then the sum total of all that positivity ends up creating a really great positive culture, productive and happy for the company and the people in it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an excellent way of putting it. And um, I have struggled actually to find the words to describe what you just said. So I'm going to use that when I get asked again.
Well, you fed it. So like, I love what you said. This is such an amazing conversation. Okay. So early stages, you've got sort of your four key individuals, you're bringing in others. And like, again, you've got like this inherent advantage, like honestly, such an advantage. You work with these people, you understand one another, like there's going to be strength in the culture and the bonds and so on. But it's still early days and it's chaotic and you're trying to like, get product market fit and so on. So how, like, as you think about adding other people and so on, how are you thinking, how is culture, figuring into your thinking as you're also simultaneously looking at market? And it's like, how do we, how do we get the product market fit? How do we get more customers? How do we like get to, break even or raise financing or whatever? Like, how do you kind of like balance those?
It is a balance. It's one of those things where, as you know, being in an early stage business, trying to get customers and finance it and all of that and meet people's needs, because everybody's an individual and has their individual needs. It is difficult at the best of times. And at the end of the day, I just genuinely believe that we're all just people trying to do our things and be successful in life. And so, just having that understanding that while you may be in a pressure cooker, you can't take it out on people. You can't, the blame game never works. You have to rally around and figure out together how you're going to get through it. And when you, again, it comes back to that feeling when you make people feel like they matter and their contributions matter, they will contribute at levels you couldn't even expect. And so it all just sort of works together no matter what the circumstance. And, I just, we all go through those stages of you've got a forecast, you don't meet your forecast. There's lots of other implications, especially if you have investors, and you get entirely anxious about all of that. But at the end of the day, what I know is this: all of these things tend to work together and they all work out. And when I think back over my career of all of those stress points that could have gone in a very ugly or negative way, had I, lost my mind on people or, done something nasty to create lack of trust in me, then things could have gone much differently than the way they went, which was lots of challenges faced, lots of anxiety, lots of all of that. But now they're in the rear view mirror. I barely even remember most of them. And I certainly don't remember a lot of the fine details of any of them. But what I know is you have those, all of those, the fabric of all of that fitting together, and there's highs and lows, and you just get through all of it. So there's again, it's a sense of no matter what, it always works out if you pull together and you work on the problem together. And a lot of lip service is paid to that when it comes down to the hard nuts stuff that happens, people's true colors do show. And that constant reinforcement of taking the glass half full approach versus the glass half empty, not playing the blame game, helps you get through those really moments of extreme stress in the most positive way.
Again, awesome. I've got like a couple things I got to riff on this. Like number one, Carol and I were talking earlier about how when times get tough, people either band together or they pull out their knives. And it sounds like pretty clear you want people who are going to say, let's band together. The people who pull out their knives, that's not going to help with the environment. It's going to drag things down. It's going to tear things apart. So that's one thing. Secondly, your values come across so clearly in what you talked about there. and we're going to actually go on to values. But what it sounds like really top level of synthesizing is sort of like take care of people, treat them well, and if you're faced with a dilemma of stress, make something happen, or treat them well, and like take care of people has got to be the priority, is ultimately what it comes down to. And that cross.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's actually then like segue onto sort of values and then other areas related to that, because people often think about values and purpose and vision and mission and so on. So how do you think about that, for Axonify? How did you think about it from the very beginning? Did you think about it in the very beginning? And if not, when did you put it in place? And how do you think about that generally for the company now and going forward?
Values are essential. They're like the critical glue that holds everything together, in my opinion. And the way I think about it is I just, have base expectations that people are going to be honest. People are going to be transparent. People are going to admit their failures. People are gonna, um, do the things and behave in ways that are conducive to the whole. And so that's the way I work day in and day out. And I'm always the one to say, like, I don't have anywhere near all the answers ever. And so I'm okay with everybody else not having the answers either. But what I know is we're going to help each other at a values level. We're going to help each other figure out what those answers are. And so, it's not something I consciously even thought about, to be honest, in the first, I would say 3 years of Axonify. It's just a way of being. But interestingly, as you grow a business and you bring in more and more people, um, you people start to expect or want these constructs and words around things like mission, vision, and values. And so we, like every other business, felt compelled to go through an exercise where we articulated those three things so that we could, talk about them and rally around them as a business. At the end of the day, can I actually, and in today's world, your mission, your vision as a technology business changes by the week. Quite honestly, like there's a general thread, but every week there's a new competitor. Every week there's some new technology. Every week there's a new customer who needs something different. And so, yes, you got to set the North Star so that people can feel connected to it. And yes, you need to articulate your values, but at the end of the day, it's your behavior day in and day out that is the most critical. It's kind of like, you made me think of something else I said to a friend of mine some years ago, who I thought, frankly, was behaving badly. And I said to him, and his point of view was, well, I'm a CEO and, I've got all these degrees and I have all these companies behind me and all this success. And I said to him, it isn't about your resume. It isn't about your title or your university degrees or the jobs that you've had or all the accomplishments you can list. It is so not about that. Who people perceive you to be is not what you've written on your resume. Who they perceive you to be is what they hear comes out of your mouth every single day, what they see you do every single day in terms of your behavior, and who they see you associate with. And when people behave well, they are thoughtful about what they say and how they say it, and associate themselves with other good people, who cares what's on your resume? None of that matters. So that to me all goes to your personal values. And when you think about a company, I think about a company as a person. That company has those same values. So how do you get, and a company can have bad values, but it really starts with the people. And those are the three things I measure on, not, like quite frankly, when we hire people, I barely look at their resumes, like barely. When I interview people, I actually do not care where they went to school, how many industry organizations they belong to, what they list as their accomplishments. I don't care about any of that. I ask, 10 good questions to try to get to the heart of who they are and how they work. And I assume a level of skill and firmly believe anybody can learn anything. Any of us can learn anything. So we're all just, smart people trying to do the thing. But those values are central to everything.
Yeah, and you said something earlier, which before our starting this conversation, which is bang on, which is if you concern yourself with making other people successful, you will be successful. So you don't need to like spend the time thinking about your own success. Just think about making other people successful, and it'll all work out. And by the way, I do want the list of 10 questions. I'd love to see those, and and to integrate them into what I do going forward. And I'm sure
For
there are
sure.
people, who would also benefit from that.
I have a great list of interview questions that I was sent by a senior recruiter some years ago. And they really do cause the interviewee to self-reflect and think about what they say. And it gives you a lot of insight into the person. So I will send you that list.
I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing them. So, going back to kind of like, tough times, you are serving frontline workers primarily in retail, other industries as well, but like 50% of your business is in retail. And we get the news a year ago that we're all going in lockdown and retail stores are closed. Walk us through what you're thinking at this point for the business, for your team, because you care so much for the individuals in your team, and you've got, 150, 200 employees at this point, and then how you ended up navigating your way through that storm, to where we are now.
Mhm. Yeah, it was, as you say, because half of our business is retail, it was a time of that first week was just a lot of what's going to happen, a lot of questions. And the good news where we're concerned is we started the pandemic with a strong balance sheet and had the flexibility to really focus on making sure our employees were safe and secure, first of all, and then how do we support our customers through this? And so we developed in that first week what I call 3 stages of getting through it. And the first one was, what's our response plan? Then what is our stabilization plan? And then what is our recovery plan? And the immediate response plan had all kinds of things to do with, people working from home. How do we continue the business on all of that? And then how do we kind of assess the strength of our customers that we're in the process of implementing, all of those sorts of things. So we had these kind of 3 stages of the plan. And I would say very, very quickly, we came to realize that while new business immediately ground to a halt, all of those deals stopped quite naturally. Customers who had already, been Axonify customers for a while, or even those that were brand new, began to use the platform in different ways. So one of the key features we have is a communications feature. And in retail, as many folks would know, but others wouldn't, retail associates generally do not have email addresses with their employers because turnover is quite high. So when they're not at work, it's very difficult to reach them en masse with a consistency of communication. Well, Axonify allowed that. And so we had very large retail customers suddenly using Axonify to communicate on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis from key leaders about what was going on, how the organization was dealing with the pandemic, what the employees should expect from them, and using our tool as a way to reach them all immediately with that consistent message. And we had the CEO of Foot Locker get interviewed in April last year in a big business magazine. And his message essentially was, we use this thing called Lace Up, which is what they call Axonify. And if we didn't have Lace Up, we would be screwed, was essentially his message. And so, we were quite happily in the position of seeing usage of the platform dramatically grow. And while new customers took a pause, we, also as a result of the strong balance sheet going in and just naturally not spending money on things like travel and meals and food in the office and things that were discretionary, we were able to maintain a very stable financial position through the summer, and then saw business come back late summer into the fall. And we finished the year a lot more strongly than we expected in March, that's for sure.
That's incredible. And I mean, some things that Carol shared with me, just to pull out, not a single layoff, for the company. And most companies took it as an opportunity to, well, I shouldn't say took it as an opportunity. Number one, they needed to concern themselves with their survival and unfortunately let some people go. And then in some cases, companies took it a step further and used it as an opportunity to make changes and restructure and so on under the guise of, hey, it's because of COVID. So, it's incredible that Axonify just generally, but even more as a company focused on retail, which got completely shut down, was able to maintain 100% of employees, through COVID. And, from what you shared with me, you're now signing, larger deals than you've ever signed. So it's just an incredible testament to what you said about when times are tough and that core value of we'll make it through. Let's have the faith in the future as long as we stick together.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it just, in the end, it ended up being a good year for us. And I think our employees did all rally around, supported our customers, supported each other, and it's worked out, and it's continuing to work out. I mean, who knows when this is all going to end, but I expect this year will be very much like the last.
Amazing. So you mentioned, earlier about how, you have this these 10 questions and, how you, kind of what your approach to interviewing. But let's talk a little bit more about recruiting and onboarding generally. How involved are you in the process? Do you interview every single person that comes in, for example? How involved are you in the onboarding? And how do you both identify and then, especially once they're on board, instill the kind of culture and attitude and values that you're looking for?
Mm-hmm. So just given the size of the business, I don't interview everybody anymore. They need to be a senior person or somebody that somebody says, I really think you should meet this person. So that's generally in the hiring process where I get involved. I do, we have quite a robust onboarding process, and it involves all the areas of the business. And I have a section of that. So every new employee goes through, and typically now when we hire people, we tend to cluster them so that if we're hiring 4 people, they all start on the same day. And so we do these things in groups, just from an efficiency point of view. And so I meet with all of them for an hour, give them the history of the business, why we do what we do, why we're successful, give them a financial overview of where we are. And then, allow them to ask any questions they want. And And I do say to them that this is the way Axonify is. I use the analogy of a cell in a human body that is strong. So we all have cells in our body, and think about a cell as a company, and the cell is super healthy and strong. When you have a virus, very, I guess, kind of
Yeah,
appropriate given the pandemic, where you have a virus, and by a virus, I mean a person who doesn't exhibit your values, try to enter the body. If you have a really super strong, healthy cell, that virus has a really difficult time penetrating the cell, and often won't, because the cell will reject the virus before it gets in. And so as we go through our interview process, our companies become quite good at identifying viruses, people who don't have the right attitudes or have huge egos or all of that. But, on occasion, the bigger you get, a virus is able to penetrate the cell. And what we know is, because we have a very healthy cell, the cell is able to expel the virus pretty quickly. And so it doesn't take root and then start to grow and infect the healthy cell. So I use that analogy when right at the outset with people, and, let them know that they're part of the healthy cell now. And while we do our best to not have viruses invade, once in a while, some get through, and it's all of our job to help that person understand they don't fit and to self-select out. And we've had that happen a number of times over the years where, somebody will join who is not exhibiting what we want them to exhibit. And it's really interesting because they get that pretty quickly, that, talking negatively about other people, criticizing work, trying to elevate themselves at the expense of others doesn't fly. And so one of two things happen. They either stop or they leave to go work somewhere else where they can get away with that behavior. And, it's really interesting. I've had over the years, many employees say to me, wow, the standard of just quality of people here is like something I've never experienced in my entire career. Everybody truly is kind of thinks this, the same way in terms of how you treat other people, the effort that you bring to bear, the openness that you have, and it's self-reinforcing. So when it starts healthy and you grow it in a healthy way, it maintains its health naturally, despite, the odd virus.
So much goodness in that response, Carol. Like, number one, like, again, we hear the values coming through in everything that you're saying. And, I love the metaphor. You say healthy cell. What kept going through my mind was immune system,
Mm-hmm.
a really healthy immune system. So if a virus comes in, the better you are able to, identify it and fight it, and, and so on. And I love your actively engaging your team members, and especially team members, as collaborators in maintaining and building the culture and the immune system. And essentially you're all working together, you're all collaborating, and becoming a network around, like, hey, you know what, oh, virus detected, let's deal with this. So much amazing, so much amazing stuff in that response, Carol. I love it. So you've been in tech, woman in tech for over 20 years. So you have like diversity by default, which is amazing. But like, how do you think about, like, how have you, diversity's in vogue, but realistically, I mean, you started with another female co-founder, then you mentioned two others, and one was female, one was male. Like, I mean, you've had diversity baked into what you've been doing from the very beginning. So just as someone who's been a long-time practitioner and leader, and exemplar of diversity, kind of educate the rest of us about how you think about diversity, and frankly, if you even think about it, because it might just be sort of like fish in water for you, like it's just air. Like, how do you think about it?
It is interesting. I think it is because of the fact that I'm female that in building the business, it just doesn't occur to me to have to kind of, how do we get more women in the business? One thing I've learned over the years is this: when you have senior women in leadership positions, it attracts other senior women to the business. And we've proven that time and again. So of our leadership team of, I think it's 12 people now, half are women, half are men. That was not by design. It was that senior women just are naturally attracted to my more diverse teams. And so we've been extraordinarily lucky in being able to just naturally attract a great mix of people. And that is true across the business as well. I've lost count of the number of people who've said to me, one of the things that attracted me to coming to work at Axonify was the fact that half the leadership team is female. And so it becomes its own kind of self-fulfilling flywheel in a way. And so almost 50% of our staff across the business are women. Now, that said, we could do and will be doing a much better job of increasing the pool of candidates for open roles to try to attract people of different ethnicities, a whole variety of different demographics to increase our levels of diversity across many other spectrums as well. And so, it's just good news. From my perspective, I don't, because I don't believe I have a conscious bias in my body against anyone or anything. It is just simply the case that unconscious bias is there in all of us. And we're trying to do everything we can do as a business to eradicate unconscious bias and open up our thinking to things that we could do on a more proactive basis to increase diversity on other scales.
Right.
We've got the women thing nailed.
From the very beginning. What's really interesting is that we often hear about, especially for women, CEOs in tech, how underfunded they are and how challenging it can be for them and so on. I think if we flip that script for a second, and again, you've been successful, and so maybe maybe it wasn't as challenging for you in terms of funding because of your past success and traction and so on. But if we believe that strength comes from diversity, not just in sort of companies, but in nature and generally, then it's interesting that it actually has been a bit of a competitive advantage for you from the very beginning to actually have you as a CEO, your co-founder, the number of people in the leadership team, because it's automatically going to attract a more diverse workforce, which will ultimately bring about a stronger company. So you've actually been able to reap some very good advantages from that.
Yeah, for sure we have. Absolutely. It is so added to the business in so many ways. So yeah, I'm glad it happened that way.
So looking back on your experiences, what do you see as the connection between great growth and great culture?
It is directly connected. There is no if, and, or but about it. You can't. Decision making happens every single day with every single person at work. And what they decide to do and how they decide to do it is rooted in how they feel. And if they feel like I need to do the best I can for myself, for the people I work with, for the company I work for, because I want us to be successful, they will generally make the right decisions. And so, and it's the accumulation of daily decisions across 200 people who are making multiple decisions every single day that make or break what happens with the business. And so, again, if people don't feel good, they feel like they're under attack, they feel like they're underappreciated, they feel like nothing they do matters, they're just not going to make the right choices every single day. They're not going to go the extra mile. They're not going to put that extra thinking into it. And that absolutely hurts your business. So, I can say with absolute certainty that how people have felt at Axonify has gotten us to where we are today, without a shadow of a doubt, and will continue to make us successful going forward. There's not even a question in my mind that we will continue to be successful no matter what challenges we face. And it's because I am 1,000% confident there are 200 people standing behind our company and our brand that genuinely want it to be good. And I don't have to do anything else.
It's super inspiring, Carol. I think we could just take that little clip, frankly, and put it, maybe I'll give it back to you and then you can actually use it in your recruiting videos, because I think anyone who hears that will feel how completely you believe what you say. And I go back to what I said in the beginning about you being one of the most genuine and authentic people that I've ever come across in business leaders, generally. And so to just share that with people, I think that a lot of people would say, wow, I want to work there, and with her and in that culture. I know we need to draw to a close because you've got a call to go to. So just two last quick questions. Top takeaways for startup and scale up CEOs and founders, on building and maintaining, I'm going to say, I'd say a great culture, but I'll say a great company.
Mm-hmm. So number one, just drop the ego. You're not as smart as you think you are, and you need people around you. So, drop the ego, and also just be real about where you're at. And, there's no harm in failure. If it doesn't work out and you decide you need to do something else, that's okay. People get wrapped up in all of that. So, drop the ego, be real with those around you, and then, be realistic about what's really going on, and failure's okay.
I'd say number three, just, based upon everything that you've said, is and be there for one another and help one another.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, last question. What's next for Axonify? What are the next major milestones? Where are you taking the company? Where are you headed?
Well, we've got tons of new product that we're building that I'm quite excited about. Some of it AI based, some of it based on customer request. And so there's just some super exciting product launches this year. We're also entering some new markets. So we're laying the foundation to go into healthcare, for example, as a new market. Also expanding our footprint in quick service restaurant space, that sort of thing. So lots of new market activities, continuing to serve our existing awesome customers, and then product stuff is all in great shape.
Awesome. Well, I know that, you shared some numbers with me that I won't share, just in terms of where the business is at. It is doing incredibly well. Carol and the business have raised a bunch of money, most of which they haven't touched because they've done such an incredible job about being unbelievably capital efficient. I have zero doubt, based upon both the numbers you shared with me, as well as, what we've talked about in terms of the culture and the values, that Axonify is going to be and continue to be an incredible success going forward. Carol, it has been an unbelievable pleasure, to have this conversation. Like I said, I've learned a ton. I am sure that a lot of other people out there are going to learn a ton. And I can't, think of, people, someone, like when people think about advisors or, someone that they might want to, connect with, if you're a CEO of a company or a founder, I think anyone should aspire, to what you have done with Axonify.
You are far too kind, far too kind. Well, it's been my pleasure, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.